Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this masterclass on setting up retail giving. Thank you so much for joining us. As an introduction, I am Anchal, and I manage and lead strategy and partnerships at Arthan. Before we step into the masterclass, I would just like to give you an overview about the larger initiative that this is a part of. This particular masterclass on setting up retail giving is a part of the Future of Fundraising track that we launched today. And the Future of Fundraising track included a couple of panel sessions during the first half of the day on understanding how foundations think, on collaboration, on institution building, and at this point in time, we are now going to set up this masterclass in collaboration with Rootbridge Academy. I'd just like to walk you through Arthan's initiative on building civil society organizations of the future, and post that we'll begin the class. The past few months have sent the world reeling with the effects of the pandemic, and the civil society that we all belong to, like all other sectors, is dealing with the crisis and its repercussions. And conversations about scripting the new normal are being heard across the board. We believe that it's very important that we begin this process now and define it for the next decade if we want to achieve the sustainable development goals which we had set many years ago, and the progress for which has been pushed back as a result of the pandemic and its effects. Building civil society organizations of the future is a long-term, future-oriented and multi-stakeholder initiative by Arthan to build a cohort of institutions that will collectively co-create solutions and co-evolve out of the pandemic and help define the future of civil society organizations in India. We will be running this initiative in collaboration with multiple stakeholders from today, which is on 22nd June 2020 till December 2021. And we aim to address ecosystem challenges and opportunities for the impact sector by building a sustainable and resilient strategy for an inclusive future. Arthan is committed to bringing in diverse voices in the sector across regions, languages, gender, and building accountability by converting these dialogues into action. The initiative plans to cover multiple themes, including but not limited to fundraising, which was today, and we plan to have other sessions around this in the near future as well. Talent, education, women's leadership, gender, urban planning, agriculture, farmer distress, climate action, to name just a few. This constantly evolving universe will bring together 3,000 plus leaders from the social impact sector as speakers and build the capacity of 10,000 plus civil society organizations across the sector for the next 1.5 to 2 years. After today's session, we now next have our Future of Jobs track, which is planned for Thursday and Friday, 25th and 26th of June. All details are on our website, arthanevents.com. In case you have any questions or would like to reach out for collaborations, please do write to content@arthancareers.com. I will now introduce the masterclass briefly and Divya, and then I'll ask her to take over. This masterclass on retail fundraising by Rootbridge Academy will help you get a well-rounded perspective on what resource mobilization through retail is and what sorts of challenges and strengths are associated with the same. I'll introduce Divya now, who will of course walk you through this in much greater detail. Divya Raghunandan is Director Mission Advancement at Rootbridge and has been in the development sector for over 20 years. After a few initial years as an activist campaigner working on climate change and sustainable agriculture, she led the program team at Greenpeace India, a non-profit run almost entirely on retail fundraising. And the later part, she worked on scaling up the vertical at Azim Premji Philanthropy on a grant-making vertical that enabled mid-sized organizations scale their ambition and reach sustainability by investing in their fundraising engine. Divya currently works with non-profits to help build their retail fundraising engine at Rootbridge. Divya, I'd like you to please take over now.
Thank you, Anchal. Thanks, Satyam and the entire Arthan team for hosting us today and allowing us to be here. Yeah, so like I said, my name is Divya, and I'm going to kind of walk you through this session. But with me today will be several other people. who are going to be extremely critical to making this session rich and useful for all of you. So like my colleague Janvi has put in the chat, what we'd like you, so, you know, this is a bit of a challenge because all of us are used to face, and it is, you know, second best to that. But what we're going to try, while we can't be as interactive as we'd like to, we want to hear a little bit from you. So just to start out and get you familiar with this, we those of you who have access to, you know, and can go on to this website called menti.com, either on your mobile or on your laptop, I'd request you to kind of, if you can go to this link that's on your screen. As soon as you go there, you should get a code that you'll need to, you know, you'll need to type in, and there'll be a question. And the first question is rather simple. Yeah, so this is the code on top, 129229. And we just wanted to get a first sense. I'm sure you've answered this through the day, and that's why you're here. But we just wanted to get a sense in terms of the three biggest challenges that you face with fundraising, with your nonprofit, your cause. You may be here for different reasons, or even as a funder. So if you can just put that in, we'd like to see at the end whether, you know, retail tries to address any of these. So please go ahead. You know, I mean, we understand that everybody may not be able to do it, but we'll see as many responses as we can get will give us a mood of the room. Okay, so we have three solid challenges. Wow. Yeah, so I think for a lot of people, storytelling and communication is absolutely core to fundraising. So in some ways, it is saying what you do in a very powerful way to be able to bring people on board. Yeah, there are issues of talent, expertise. So I think it's a people problem, it's expertise. There is the external situation, which is dynamic and changing. And of course, there's money gets more money. So I think that's out there. So I'm going to leave this for us to revisit, come back. It's also for us at Rootbridge to make sure that we're addressing some of your biggest challenges. And I'd like to go to the next slide. I'll just give you a very brief presentation. I mean, a brief, you know, update on who Rootbridge is. So as the name suggests, we think of ourselves as a living bridge between nonprofits and, you know, these needs that you've put out, they're pressing fundraising needs. And we'd like to link nonprofits to citizens across the country who we feel have deep values very much aligned often to the nonprofits and their cause. But they need to find a way and an easy way to connect and to contribute. And sometimes their contributions are in kind and sometimes through money. So Rootbridge is divided into three big verticals. The central is the practice. So in the practice, we simply do fundraising through retail for nonprofits. And so, you know, we have a business model and we work on that. So we, you know, and some of you here in the audience, I've seen are people who we've started having conversations and we've greatly benefited from them. Every fundraising, especially retail fundraising, requires great people. And your fundraising practice is only as good as the people you have. So we have a school of fundraising where we train people, fundraisers, leaders, you know, leaders of fundraising teams, etc., to be able to go out there and fundraise and represent the nonprofits that they stand for on the street or in a digital medium. And so we look, and the entire curriculum is very broad. It looks at perspectives, it looks at skills, and it looks at fundraising, the whole numbers and the analytics. And the third part of it is, I think fundraising is also not static. It's, you know, it's ever changing, it's dynamic. We've identified, you know, some big bottlenecks and big challenges in the kind of fundraising we do. And so our constant endeavor is in the entire bit on learning and, you know, kind of looking at what's coming out of the practice and putting that and making it stronger. And sometimes not only from our practice, but from the practice of the entire sector out there. Okay. So that's a little bit about Rootbridge. In terms of today's session, I'm going to try and we're going to do this in 4 parts. I'm going to take you through an introduction. Some of you may be familiar, so I apologize if it's repetitive. But for those of you who are new to retail, I want to introduce the entire idea of retail fundraising. Then my colleague Shemeer will get you into a level deeper. So we call that the nuts and bolts of retail. And then we have a panel because we wanted to broaden the perspective around it. And actually the true leaders of retail fundraising are possibly sitting, some of them in this room, some of them outside, who've been doing this for a long time, or who've actually tried it out, had challenges, had successes, had failures. And so they're best placed to actually come together in a panel and address some of the core bottlenecks that we see. And at the end, like promised, I want to kind of very quickly wrap up and take you through some of the things that we're going to leave you with. So we don't want to see this as a one-time session, but for those of you who are inspired to try it out or at least explore it, there are a bunch of tools that you can sit within your organization and take it forward. Yeah. So, so maybe we can start with a little bit of the introduction. So retail fundraising has been as old as anyone can remember. So from little hundi collections in the temple to church collections on Sunday. So all of this is retail. It's small sums of money by a large number of people that's being collected in one place and used for any cause, right? So this has been there. It started, I mean, over time, it has got more systematic. NGOs have been thinking about it, of making it more systematic. So for me, I'd like to think of one example of the power of retail. And when I think of that, I think of Obama's campaign, right? So I'm going to come back to that in just a bit. Okay, so maybe we'll go to that. So Obama's campaign was very interesting. So this was one of the, at least most televised and known retail election campaigns. And Obama's team actually took a decision that they would raise pretty much all their money for their political campaign by reaching out to various people in their constituency and outside, talking to them about the issue and getting them to contribute. At the end of it, the data shows that around 50% of what Obama raised for that campaign came from small donations, that is people contributing less than $200. Right? And the interesting thing is this money was greater than what Mitt Romney actually raised overall, right? And this is not necessarily because more people believed in Obama than Romney. It was really because Obama's strategy ensured that his team actually went out and spoke to as many people as he could and asked a simple question: would you like to contribute? And this is our story, and this is our cause, and this is how we'll bring about change. So most people are able to contribute, and they contributed whatever they could. So this, in some ways, retail actually does not only, it's not just about the money, but it's also about aligning people around a cause and bringing together a huge number of people who can back the issues that you stand for, back the organization that you stand for, and stay with you through thick and thin, right? And that kind of gives a lot of independence and power to an organization. So I'm going to take a pause. Yeah, I think people are worried that I'm running with I just wanted you to know that this presentation will stay with you and all the details will be there, right, with you. So we're going to go back to menti.com and get people to answer the next question, which is, why have you stayed away from retail? If any of you feel apprehensive to retail, why have you, can you describe why? And, can you put down some words that say why? So I've got a few responses. So I wonder if there are any more. Yeah, so retail fundraising you can think of it as small sums of money from large numbers of people, but we do it again and again. So it's not a one time, a crowdfunding may be one time, but retail will happen again and again. Okay, so I'm really glad to see that one of the biggest things is lack of knowledge, and I do hope we can do something about that today. It is expensive, so there's a cost factor. I think I saw experience and understanding of it. So what we'll do is, the reason why we're doing this is that in the course of time, we're also giving a heads up to all our panelists to kind of see whether we can actually address some of these issues out there. Right? We may not be able to do all, but we're around and a lot of our material will stay with you. Okay, so great. So thank you very much for that. Yeah. So what we're going to do now is we've kind of covered what retail is, and I've also tried to make the distinction between crowdfunding. There's one more aspect that I want to actually just before we come to why you would invest into retail fundraising, I want to say that there are two kinds of retail that we can think about. One is when somebody feels extremely motivated about a cause, they just want to immediately write a check or swipe their credit card and give you money right then. So we call that one time. So it's a one-time donation, and it goes a long way because it helps tide over an urgent situation. Like during COVID, as many one-time donations are fabulous. Then there's the other kind, which we'll be focusing a little bit more on, and for reasons that you will see over time, is the recurring giving, which is basically where somebody decides that I think I can afford 500 rupees every month. I'll forego one dinner or a fancy lunch, and I'll give that 500 rupees to this particular cause, but I'll give it month on month. And the job of the nonprofit or the agency is to make sure that you create a system which allows that person to give very easily month on month. And so this adds up for the, and this also helps build a relationship with that person. So we have two types that we'll talk about today. We'll talk about one time, and we'll talk about month on month. With crowdfunding, it's usually, it's kind of like a one time for a particular issue which has a sense of urgency. All of these are extremely valuable, right? And they have their place. Okay, so this question was, why would you choose to invest in this? So what are the big value adds that you get from it? And I'd like to see, that the next session that Shemeer has when he gets into nuts and bolts, we'd like to see whether, how you can actually be independent. So my assumption of when people write independent, it's because, the big value of retail fundraising is that it's unrestricted, right? Which is, if it's from an institution or a corporate, it's a fantastic ROI. You write a proposal and you get a large sum of money upfront, but that money is linked with a particular set of program objectives that you have to work. So it's very rare that you can use that money to build your corpus or to pay a team a little bit more, or things like that. So, or to build your back end or to build your systems. And that's where nonprofits have a challenge. So what retail does is, what you're doing is you're raising the money for your nonprofit and not for a particular program, or at least even if it comes in for a particular program, it can be used. We just need to be accountable to the donors to tell them what has happened in general with all the milestones that your organization has promised in the conversation, right? So in that sense, it keeps you, so it's an unrestricted pot of money. And because and you have a large number of donors giving you small amounts of money, it's unlike when one big donor pulls out and you fall apart. So it gives you that. And that's why regular support actually adds a lot of value. Right. Okay. So thank you for that. I'm going to now transition into our next session, the next part of it. And I'm hoping that, if you haven't got some things clear, I would urge you to kind of just go through this, because you'll have a lot of repetition, but going down in a little bit of detail. I'd like to invite Shemeer. Shemeer is a close colleague of mine. He's a director of technology and innovation at Rootbridge. He's a hardcore techie at heart, but kind of combines that understanding of technology and uses that to help nonprofits amplify their impact. He's been in the leadership team of Amnesty. Amnesty is another organization that pretty much does 99% of their fundraising to retail. And he's also designed a strategy for, in his role in the senior management team at Azim Premji Philanthropic Initiatives. He is also the founder of Tech for Good, an initiative that actually works with smaller organizations to enable them with technology. So Shemeer will, my colleague at Rootbridge will now take you onto the nuts and bolts. Over to you, Shemeer.
Hey, thank you so much, Divya. Good evening, everyone. And it must have been a very long day for all of you. So thank you so much for tuning in to us. And like Divya said, we'll try and cover as much as we can without overwhelming you. I've tried to keep this a light session. Just to reiterate, retail fundraising, like Divya said, is about this powerful human persuasion, right? So that is what makes it so different from crowdfunding, digital giving, ads. It's about two people having a passionate conversation about a cause. And at the end of it, even if the person decides not to give, they still go back with so much, right? So that's what I was trying to kind of show in this picture that is in front of you. And Divya had mentioned that the street fundraiser that you see here is the core person in this operation. So we have put a lot of effort into our school in training, not just our own fundraisers, but also fundraisers from other organizations. Let me now try and it's a complex process. Many of you had also mentioned this because it involves setting up a field team, it involves setting up operations, it involves month-on-month debate, etc., which is great for larger nonprofits. But how can even the small and medium nonprofits go ahead and do it? Right? So in this next chart, I have tried to break down the process of retail fundraising into these three basic steps, which is the only thing that I would like you to take away. It involves, the process starts by having a team of fundraisers, trained fundraisers, standing on the streets in front of organizations, companies, anywhere. In COVID situation, there have been innovations around people doing this on a Zoom call, right? Or even a phone call. So there are various ways, but the level of persuasion differs. But ultimately, it's about having those one-to-one conversations, and which ends up in a sign-up, right? And a sign-up is basically a pledge that a prospective donor makes, saying, "Hey, I really liked what you told me, and I would like to contribute to your cause, and here is my pledge. It should be 500 per month, 1,000 per month. It could be in the form of a paper form. It could be in the form of an online payment gateway, which many of you must have used while taking an EMI. Right? So it's not very different from that, but things, and thankfully the payment ecosystem in India is innovating rapidly. So this will become more and more effortless for the giver. So once the sign up is done, you can imagine it as happening on a tablet in the street by a fundraiser. The money then finally comes to the bank. The no-show term is a slightly archaic term, but still relevant, because if there are paper forms, when it goes to the bank will sometimes say, "Hey, this is not authenticated." So you end up losing a few donors signups here. So we only are focusing, and there is very little that we can do to get them back because this happens on the street and things like that. So we are focusing more on money in the bank, which are all the signups that got successfully translated into a gift, into a donation that hits your bank. But even after people give, they will continue. Like, we sometimes are not able to pay EMIs, could be financial reason, could be that the NGO did not keep me posted, did not communicate with me, so I don't really know what is happening. So I decide to leave, right? And that is why managing your donors is so important, and to have a nice strategy around it. It could be in the form of a welcome phone call as soon as they sign up. It could be in the form of an actual field visit when things get better, interesting WhatsApp messages that you can send, right? And the better you manage, the higher the lifetime value of the donor will be, right? So that's, if you could internalize this graph, this process flow, that will be a good takeaway for this slide. So I'm just going deep diving into some of the other we talked about donor signups. The second is no show, which is even though people sign up, there is a chance that the bank might say no. It's a very small right now, and thankfully the RBI is going to make it really easy for payment gateways to do this easily. So over time, this will become a non-entity, but I'm just putting it here for your knowledge so you know about it. Donor acquisition is this number, which is all the people whose money actually kind of hits your bank, right? Sometimes it happens that there is an insufficient balance in their account, so you might have to try and hit the bank a second time. You have to actually request them to give that money to you on a monthly basis. There are systems to do that. It's not a one-to-one request. It's a bulk request that you send to your bank, right? Then of course, this is the big thing, no? That donor retention is, I want to focus on what are the good things that you can do so that you can retain your donors so that they start giving you, continue to give to you and have a higher lifetime value, right? So lifetime value, you might have heard this from different places. What we mean here is that the more you keep, the more engaged the donors are, the longer that they will continue to give to you. And that is where the power of retail really comes in. Apart from being predictable, it makes it predictable because you know that next month again, I'm going to get this money from them, right? So the definition for this is here in front of you. If you multiply the monthly donation that they give into the number of months active, yeah? So you can imagine what the lifetime value of a Netflix, Amazon Prime subscriber must be. So there is a reason why they use this model, because it works over the long time. So in a long term, this can go up to 15 to 20,000 rupees from from a cohort of donors. It's a little tricky, so we'll go next, in the next slides, I'll try and cover some of that. So I thought I'll tell a story, and I know you might have been seeing a lot of COVID graphs, so we'll use a lot of, I'll try and use some refreshing non-COVID graphs. Some of this might look exponential, but in a good way. So here I'm trying to, let's all imagine that there are some fundraisers on the street for one of the organizations in this group of listeners who decided to do this. And we end up getting 100 donors from the street, right? And because of the nature, like I said, there is a reality, and these are numbers that you see here are based on actual numbers over a period of time that people leave. Subscribers leave, donors leave for various reasons. They might have changed their job, lost their job, financial insecurity, etc., etc. But one of the top reasons has been that the NGO did not keep me in the loop. Is one of the top reasons that you will hear. So in this graph, what we are trying to show is, if we get those 100 donors in month one, right? So we have 100 donors in month one. This is how they will exit. So in the next month, there will be only 85 donors. So 15 would have left for all the reasons that I mentioned. In the next month, month 3, there will be 75 left. And so on and so forth. So you'll see that by the first year, a large number of people have left you, right? So which means that this is the time when you have to keep them really engaged, right? And then as you move forward, you will see that from the 100 people that you got in month one, in almost till month 55, there's like 5 years way ahead, right? This is the power of predictability. There will still be 2 people who continue to give to you, even if it is that 1,000 rupees per month, right? So that's if you do good retention. Now, if you click on the other thing, this is poor retention. So here the idea is that if you don't really do all the necessary things, even simple things like a welcome call and things like that, there is a good chance that more people will leave, and you will lose all the people that you acquired somewhere in the middle of their life cycle, which if you did good retention, you'll be able to retain more people. Yeah? So again, all this will be available to you. It's a live page. We'll send it to you right after this session. So don't worry about taking screenshots and things like that. So now that we have understood that retention is important and it's a game changer, we talked a lot about what lifetime value is. So let's see these 100 donors who are from our story, right? What will be the donation that we get from them, right? Or many of you must have experience of crowdfunding, which is usually one time, or there could be one-time gifts, etc., events that you would have done. But this is a very different thing, because for the 100 donors that we got in the beginning of this story, right? In the first month, each of those 100 donors will give you, let's imagine they give you 1,000 rupees per month, right? So in the first month, you have 100,000, 1 lakh rupees hitting your bank, right? In the next month, though some would have left, you still have 85 people giving you 1,000 each, so 85,000, and so on and so forth, right? Depending upon the retention that we saw. As a function of that, you start seeing the donations. So people leave, so of course the donation keeps coming down. Over 5 years, you hardly get anything from this first 100 actors and actresses from our wonderful story, right? But that is where the beauty of retail fundraising starts, because we have to look at the lifetime value, right? And that is a totally different story. It completely changes, because every month people that have given, that overall amount that you get at the end of it is around 14 in this case of these 100 donors. Over a period of time, if you do good retention, you can get up to you will enable them to contribute up to 14 lakh INR over a period of time. Right? So it's important. Please do, at the end of this session, you can go into the details of it and see how cumulatively the value keeps changing. That's why I said that the lifetime value is an important aspect for all of you who are interested in retail fundraising to consider. Right? Now let's make it a little bit more interesting. It's all very simple now. We had 100 donors. We did in month 1, we followed them in our mind and saw how much they will give us over the next. Now, what if we get 100 donors every month for 5 years, right? So because fundraising is an ongoing activity, and it's not like we just acquire 100 donors in 1 month and we disband the team. We're going to keep doing it repeatedly. So let's try and visualize how will it be if I get 100 donors every month for the next 5 years, that is 60 months. For the benefit of this graph, I have only taken the second, I have skipped 1 month, but the values are correct, just to make it readable for all of you. So we are saying now that, let's say we get 100 new donors every month. And we also know, because of the retention and attrition of donors, that every month people are going to leave. But the beauty is that every month new donors are also coming. So we get this concept of active donors, right? So we had 100 donors in month 1, but as we go to month 2, we would have lost a few donors from the month 1 cohort, but we would have got new 100 donors from the month 2 cohort, right? And then month 3, month 4, month 5, month 6, like that, it keeps going on every month. And then finally, because it was a 5-year projection that we are doing, at the end of 5 years, we will have around 1,450 active donors. So even if you stop operations at that time, these people will continue to be active, because they'll behave in that same way, provided you do some retention activities, correct? So that's what this graph means. Yeah. So now that we know the active donors, let's now try and calculate what will be the monthly donations from these people. It's also available for you in this graph. Because it is a standard amount that we have put, we have said that it will be 1,000 rupees per month is what we have taken as part of this script for this story. So you will see that it keeps increasing, keeps increasing, and you hit this big amount of 14.9 lakhs that we talked about, right? But even if you stop your operations, they will continue to keep giving you, right, for the rest of the life cycle. What here it means is, in month 60, you would have got 100 new donors, and people who are left from the previous months, they will all continue to give you and slowly disappear, even if you don't do any fundraising activity and just basic retention. And the next tab, of course, gives you the powerful LTV, by lifetime value. And you will see that calculation wise, this is just a multiplication of doing 100 donors for 60 months, right? But what this really shows is how this actually builds. Even the curve, the shape of the curve gives you confidence. It gives you the fact that it's predictable, that I can actually, sitting in month 7 or 9, I can actually plan for program activities in these months, because I can more or less predict, which I am not sure if we can say for any other forms of fundraising, where it is very dependent on the markets, on the funder, and so many other things. And like Divya said, it is also about being able to spend this money in any way you like. So this is what it will look like if we did 100 donors for 5 years. So the next slide that I'm going to show you is, okay, all this is great if donors are just coming into the door and giving us. This will need a lot of work, right? So it's time to bring the villain in the story, or the challenge in the story. And many of you mentioned that, of course, there is investment. And like Rajesh, one of our co-founders, tells us that retail fundraising is a very precious product. And the reason it is precious is Divya has already shared that with all of you, right? It's predictable, it's independent, you can use it for the benefit of your programs, right? It's so many other qualities to it, right? And because it is precious, it is also expensive. But there is a lot of myth around it, around the expenses. So in this chart, we have tried to kind of give you a sense of what that looks like. So again, we are taking the same previous condition that, hey, all this fundraising, if I have to do, what does it look like? How much will I have to spend? We have put in some rough numbers to estimate that what will be the cost of acquiring one donor, right? So let us say these are bare minimum. As you can see, it's not just the cost of fundraiser salary. It also, you'll need a support team. There is a communications team creating amazing content. There is a retention telecalling team doing phone calls and WhatsApp messages. So you can think of it as more or less, there is a lot that goes into acquiring and servicing a donor, which is anywhere between 7,500 for one donor to 9,000, depends on the quality that you want to invest in. So in this case, if that is the case, for the numbers that we showed above, it will mean that in a period of 5 years, you will spend, in the red chart, a total of 4.5 crores, right, in the 5 years, to raise a donation. So the donations, you can see, start slowly, right? Because as the numbers pick up, then slowly it over surpasses the actual cost of fundraising that you have, and reaches a peak when your operations are about to halt. I'm assuming that they are halting. Otherwise, it'll keep going up, right? And then it slowly goes down, your donations and net income. Yeah? So that's what we have tried to show in this graph, right? All the details are available here for you. The takeaway here are two terms. I don't know if anyone mentioned, but CFOs hate retail fundraising. Boards don't understand sometimes retail fundraising. There's a good joke that there is that boards say, how can it be fundraising if you guys are constantly spending money, right? So we try to create this graph to both help with your CFO, who will be very interested in the cash flow, right? So for him, or for her or him, it is going to be that, okay, great, but how much, when can I start spending the money from the donations that I get, right? So in this case, we are calling it net income becomes positive. So donations in that month, more than the cost incurred in that month, comes to around 13 months. So basically, your CFO needs to have enough cash to help you for the first 13 months, post which the donations that will come in will automatically, with that, you will be able to spend for your team. Then, of course, there is a larger question of break even, which is, though your net income is positive, you still have spent a lot of money and you need to recover all that. Yeah. So in this case, it is about 27 months that you will minimum 27. It can go up to 32 months, depending upon the quality of your fundraising operations. Right. So these are all indicative, but we have tried the best that we can from the details that we have got. Yeah. So that's the thing in this graph. The next slide that you see here is this question of what if I did only one-time donations, right? So this curve, please focus on the quality of the curve, which is, though it takes some time to pick up, you're spending a lot of money from your account, it's all negative, 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 but there comes a point where it overpicks and you are able to then generate more, right? So you will see that based on the amount of money that you spend, these are worst case scenarios. So the actual value might be much more, and it has to be long term. In 5 years, this is the best that can come. Right? Then, if you look at one-time donation only, the curve is different, right? And these are again best case scenarios that I've taken for one time. So retail, we have tried to take the worst case scenarios for one time. We have tried and taken the kind of best case scenarios that, every donor, we get 100 donors every month, but they only give once. And the average gift size is 5,000 rupees, correct? But everything, and the good things about this is you'll always, the CFOs love it. So basically, you'll always be able to pay or spend for your operations from the donations that you get, right? So your net income is always positive. But over time, there is no 10-year game in this, right? And it is, like Divya said, it's also about people who will rally behind their cause. And this is the graph that shows people that rally behind your cause, right? It is people who continue to give, even if it is in small amounts or large amounts, and build that portfolio for you. Uh, there is no, there are also examples where we have seen where people want to use a hybrid of regular giving and one-time donations, right? So in that case, if you would like to do something like that, I'll show you. We have created this resource. Whatever I use to project these numbers, it's an Excel model, and you could just go change the numbers in that. All the assumptions here that we took 100 donors every month, you could make it 150, or you could make it 10. Instead of saying 1,000 rupees per month, you can say 500 per month, and kind of project what the costs and revenue will be for you, right? So you could even try adding both, let's say 50 regular gifts and 50 one-time gifts, and see how that works out, right? It'll be interesting to see what your insights are on that. So before we go into the, before I give you the download section, I just wanted a very key takeaway, which we internally at Rootbridge are kind of trying to align ourselves with. The key takeaway for us has been that, if I try to imagine why retail fundraising in India has been a big challenge, when we thought about it, it's like people are trying to solve this problem. So they're constantly bringing in new donors with a large number of team. We are constantly trying to increase the water flow into this system, but people are not focusing enough on retention, right? So, and that is what we see. Donors are just getting away, where there could be so much value for them. The second thing is they don't stay in for the long term. The real value for, as you saw in the graphs, is if you do it in the long term, if you do it for 5 to 10 years, and whatever money that, let's say, you raise during your retail fundraising, you should also invest back into it, right? So that's also very important. And working together with teams. So in the organizations that I have worked with, I've been blessed with teams that actually work together with a fundraising team. But retail fundraising, unlike digital fundraising and other things, one time, is a matter of teamwork, where your program team, your board, your finance team, everyone has to align themselves and work together towards achieving these goals, right? So keep this picture of a leaking bottle or a leaking bucket in your mind, which is giving you the indication that it's all about, as long as you retain and not allow donors to leave, by doing very simple things, simple activities, we will reap the benefits of it as the lifetime value from them, right? So post this in the link that this entire web page will be shared with you. It's a public web page, so you can go there, and all the calculations that I've done here, all the graphs that you see above have been generated using this projector. It's fairly simple to use. You'll need basic knowledge of Excel. There are some yellow cells in that you can change. I don't want to go deep into that for you, right? So if you can just download it, and if you have any doubts, like I said, this is a level 1 that we want to do with all of you. Please do write into us. There is a newsletter that you can subscribe, or you can write to us at hello@rootbridgeacademy.com. Everything is available here. Yeah. I have 2 minutes. Let me just see if there are any
Shemeer, there's one question. I mean, I think there's a useful question, given that we are in a context of COVID, and street is always a challenge. So would you be able to throw some light on, getting online and try your entire model on DigiFacing? Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So that was, this might never have happened. When COVID hit, we were almost, we actually have a real example of this. It's a great question. So we were almost ready, everything was there. We had started hiring fundraising, and then this hit, right? And at the same time, we knew the clients that we were working for, funding became even more important for them. And COVID became more and more uncertain over a period of time. So we really thought, what is it that we could do to pivot, right? So at the center of it, we thought, hey, at the heart of it, what is it that we can do, right? There are so many things that we can do. We can set up digital fundraising, we can do, crowdfunding, etc. There are so many things that we could do. But at the heart of it is human persuasion. So we all told ourselves that whatever model we come up with, there has to be a personal one-to-one human persuasion, like it's happening now with all of us, right? We are able, though we are not able to meet in a room, thanks to digital technology, it is possible for us to now remotely connect with donors. And what we've been doing is training our fundraisers to do the same human persuasion over a Zoom call. We can also, it also gives you the benefit of having interactive screens like we just used, convincing the donor to actually make that donation online itself right away. So there is no paper forms and nothing, it's all online. So that also, there were so many opportunities around it. So we call it the digi-facing model instead of the face-to-face model, which is you're just facing them digitally, whether it is Zoom, Google Meet, or anything like that. The challenge, of course, has been street is powerful in a big way, right? So if you look at digi fundraising, if you're a medium nonprofit, you need to buy ad space because the donor darlings are already there on the top of Google search. They're already delivering ads on NDTV, on all the good places. So there is really no space for everyone. There is no equalizer. So the street was a great equalizer, right? So regardless of NGO, a large NGO being able to access anything or having a great brand, they still have to stand in the street and your access to people is equal. So it was a great equalizer. So that is a challenge. The way we have been managing the challenge is many of our clients have a list of donors who have given to them in the past. Could be people who have given small amounts or part of their newsletter or friends of friends. So they've been kind enough to put that all into a nice sheet and give it to us. And we write emails to all those donors and set up video calls with them and try to convert them into donors and then take them through the retail fundraising. So it's been a great opportunity actually for us on how this has worked for us. There's one more question. If your NGO has FCRA certification, can you use retail? So yes, if you have an FCRA certification, then of course you can raise that. You can raise retail money from the US. Yes, Rishabh. Cool.
Yeah. Okay, Shemeer, I just wanted to come in on one point, which was, I mean, there is the big question mark on investment, right? And if you looked at organizations like Amnesty and Greenpeace, they've had a global organization that has made the initial investments, right? So what happens to Indian organizations? So the way we'd like to look at it, and this is a conversation that we've had and some experience, is that I think this is an ecosystem challenge, and it's an ecosystem. We need to look at it as different stakeholders in the system. So for example, what we tried to do when I was at the Azim Premji Philanthropy was that we said that one of our biggest values as, or at least one portfolio as a donor needed to be that we are strengthening the systems and the fundraising capacity of NGOs rather than constantly paying for their programs or supporting programs, because supporting programs means that we're not building capacity so that they become sustainable at one point and then we can withdraw. So as donors, we felt like maybe there is a huge value in supporting the back end rather than actually the program that delivers to the community in need. So what we did is we helped organizations build a portfolio of fundraising that was most suitable for them. So each organization knew that, obviously, and kind of designed it. So one organization felt retail needed to be 60%, whereas another thought only 10% of retail is enough to cover during a really big crisis. And based on that, the initial investments were put in, whether it was people or some system or whatever, was put in by a funder. So I think there's a role for nonprofits to think and build up knowledge and understanding and an ability and the communications ability. But at the same time, we'd also like to urge donors, innovative funders, to start thinking very differently about the kind of funding models and the approaches that you would like to kind of have in the future, because you can actually strengthen and keep organizations, in 5 years, you wouldn't need to be there in the system if you're going to look at this kind of LTV model. So that's something that's, I think, a huge value. Yeah. Sorry, I was off video for that. But yeah, I just wanted to make that point. So if I'm going to take the liberty for us to close this particular session, I do realize that some of you have very specific questions on the formats of how we, how we receive, we give the ATG receipts, etc. We're really happy to take these questions because they're at a level of detail that we're happy to do at another point. Right? At this point, I would like to move and give our next set of panelists enough time because I think they'll bring immense amount of value. So we have three people, who I think have actually lived the experience of retail fundraising. So Ananthapadmanabhan works with purpose-driven leaders and social sector organizations that may aspire to make a difference. He's the founder and chairman of Rootbridge Academy. He was the former CEO of Azim Premji Philanthropic Initiatives. And before that, Anant was the CEO of Amnesty. He set up Amnesty in India, Greenpeace in India, and was also the international program director of Greenpeace International. He started his career as a school teacher in the Krishnamurti Foundation of India. Thanks, Anant, for being here. We also have Yogita Verma. So she currently heads resource mobilization and communications at Breakthrough India. She's had more than 20 years of experience in marketing, communications, and fundraising across the corporate sector as well as the nonprofit sector. And prior to this, she was the head of resource mobilization at CRY, one of the organizations that we all look to for retail. Yogita has worked with organizations like Hindustan Times and Nestle in the past. Thanks, Yogita. Yogita has kind of worked with us for many, many years, and it's really, really nice to have her on board. Our third panelist for this evening is Avijit. Avijit has worked at the intersection of campaigning and digital technology for the past decade. He currently heads Jhatkaa.org with a mission to build tools that will enable citizen engagement in democracy and increase government accountability. I worked with Avi many, many years ago in Greenpeace. So Avi was the one who brought in the entire idea of digital mobilization and made it real for us in Greenpeace. And then he went on to lead change.org as a country director. And before moving to the role as global development director, where he built strategy for user engagement globally. So thank you very much, all of you, for being here. It's really nice to have you on board. I'm going to hand over to Anant, who's going to take us through this conversation. Over to you.
Thanks, Divya. First, I'll begin by the classic question. Am I audible?
Anant, we need your volume a little up. We can't hear you.
Okay, is this better?
A little, can we
Not
get
really.
more? Yeah.
Oops, I can hear you so loud that, is this better?
Yes, that's slightly better.
Slightly only. Is this okay?
Yes, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yogita and Avijit, do you guys want to check your mics as well?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, checking if I'm audible.
Yogita?
You, Yogita.
Good,
thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you everybody. So we're going to have a bit of a conversation between us, we decided when we planned for this session. So it's not going to be me asking them questions alone. I mean, they would ask questions of each other, I suppose, disagree with each other if they so feel, and ask questions of me. So after the first sort of question, I'll have a question for each of you. And then, we can kind of have a more free-flowing conversation, if that's all right. So I'll start with you, Yogita. I think one of the questions that was on the panel, I mean on the question box, was around how does an organization, so you have, I think you told us that you at Breakthrough tried to make retail work. You've tried a bunch of things. Now you feel that you're kind of through that phase of experimenting, and you're ready for quote unquote big things, right? So that seemed to be the sense you gave. So in this process of experimenting over the last 18 months, how has, say making retail a big part of what Breakthrough does, how has it influenced the whole organization, if you like? What has it done to the DNA? How have various teams had to work together, right? So what has it been like as an institution? Right? That might be a good place to start.
So I think many things. Famously, I think one of the things that's really happened to Breakthrough, which was primarily foundation funded before we started on this retail journey, was that fundraising used to be this small little function on the side where you had a few people writing proposals, and everybody thought the money just came in and then they went on with their work. I think what's really happened with introducing retail is that we managed to bring fundraising, front and center of the organization. Aman, who I think is attending this session, famously, when we started fundraising, went about getting every single employee in the organization to start a crowdfunding page, just to get them to understand what we go through. This eventually led to competitions between the employees to say who actually raised more money. And suddenly everybody was like, oh, I can do this. The change in mindset, the change in this sense, the excitement around every new donor you bring in and every rupee you bring in, which is unrestricted, gives you the latitude to do whatever you want. It changes the energy in the organization. So every lakh we raise, through retail is celebrated as much as 10 lakhs that we raise from, CSR or other sources.
Why is that? Why such a markup for retail? I mean,
I think because retail just gives you the latitude to do what you want. So that's our money. That's money we can do whatever we want to do with. And I think in COVID times, what's really happened is that we had a few CSR partners pull out, and we were actually at a stage where retail could come in and plug those gaps. And otherwise we'd have been left high and dry. So it really, in a sense, makes the organization more comfortable, makes it far more relaxed. Also, a lot more
just one relaxed, entrepreneurial, all that's great. But it's almost, when you say we can do what we want, it's not as though you don't have an accountability to the donor, right? It's just a different kind of accountability. Could you say a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, in fact, so that's an interesting question, because I think one of the things that retail does is it makes you extremely cost conscious. When you have foundation funding, a lot of the focus is actually on ensuring that you spend it as per a certain pattern. So all your focus is on spending the money and making sure you spend as per what you've committed. In retail, everything you spend, you look at ROI suddenly become this huge concept which everybody's talking about. Cost of fundraising is something that you're constantly trying to bring down. And then we also know that the only way to retain donors is by being transparent, by having authentic conversations, by giving them compelling reasons why to stay with you. And that's the highest form of accountability. It's not because somebody said something or whatever. It's really about them understanding your work and having a relationship which is deeper and more meaningful. So I think it's the highest form of accountability.
Yeah, but it's a different kind of accountability. It's not to line items, but to purpose, and
absolutely
transforms the organization. So Avi, if I may, start with this question. Breakthrough is a much larger organization. They have an international pedigree and so on. You are for want of a better word, a Bangalore startup, right? I mean Jhatkaa, not you personally, but you're a kind of a Bangalore startup. But you have kind of persisted with this idea of retail over the last many years. You have found a way of trying. You found a way of finding capital. One of the questions on the panel was very blunt and said, how do you expect us to find money for 5 years? Right? So two questions for you. How have you managed to get your small organization interested in and continuously engaging with retail fundraising? And the second question is why? I know that you've done quite well with institutional funders, and it's not like you were in dire straits or anything of that sort.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think the answer lies in terms of the long-term sustainability of it. And the graphs that Shemeer shared earlier, which really show how it pays off in the long term. And of course, that ability to be making our own decisions in terms of course, like you said, we would use our values framework and our vision and mission to, direct our spending, but, making decisions that are not based on objectives of institutional funders. We also see it as a value in terms of the credibility of our work, because the way that we function is we get citizens involved in campaigns. And if a citizen sees the value and sees the impact that we've created, that they can put their money where their mouth is, so to speak. So we do have regular fundraising asks to people who have taken part in our campaigns and actually seen change. And I think that's an important part of the process, because how do you convince someone to give you on a regular basis is by building that credibility and relationship. That said, I think the big challenge that we're faced is building that credibility purely online. So while we do have the back-end page set up for people to give money monthly, when we and we primarily communicate with people through email and phone. When we send people emails for fundraisers, we find that it's a much larger percentage of them that give one time than compared to recurring. And so that last mile challenge of really convincing the person that face to face, I think is pretty important, and it's something that we haven't yet cracked. But I've seen the models. I have been at Greenpeace before, and we've seen how effective it's worked there. And of course, all of the math works out. But I think, I don't know who said it earlier, but someone pointed out that you need the right team, and I think that's really the biggest learning that I've had in my experiments with this.
Where have you found the capital, Avi? You presumably have found someone to give you money to do this.
That's true. So I think, I've had a bit of luck with, being able to convince the board so that we can use some of the major donor money that is unrestricted towards this. I have also used, the financial sustainability as an argument with major donors as a way to get them on board to kind of fund this project.
Mm-hmm. And you had some success. When you had some success talking to your traditional donors to say they must give you resources to build a retail fundraising plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that it makes a lot of sense to even bigger institutional funders, because it means that they don't have, you're not dependent on them in the long term. They will basically be able to give you a trajectory to financial sustainability so that they can invest their money in, other causes that need it as well. So I think it's a good, it works well with institutional funders as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yogita, what's been your experience with trying to get some of your traditional funders to sort of support breakthroughs and the board and the traditional funders, of course, to support breakthroughs foray into retail?
So Anant, as you know, Azim Premji Philanthropic Initiatives is one of our large funder, one of our largest funders that actually invested in building our capacities on retail. I do not think there are too many institutional donors who are willing to put that, format of trust into an organization to be able to say, let me risk the money and see where you take it. APPI is atypical in that sense. And also with boards, I think initially the conversations are like, why are the costs so high? There isn't much understanding. Maybe Shemeer needs to come and do some of his graphs for them and explain it far better than I do. But a lot of skepticism. Even the Breakthrough CFO, when we started, was initially very skeptical and now is the greatest proponent of retail fundraising. Seeing how, retail fundraising has given us unrestricted income. I think the entire attitude has changed, but it's an uphill task convincing people that we need to invest, because if you have the capacity to stay long, then you reap benefits. in the near term, you do make losses. And that's something that really depends on the organization's appetite for it.
Divya and Shemeer, there are a lot of questions in the question and answer box that are very technical in nature. I think you guys can answer them better, so I'm not going to pick them up. I'm just going to go with the more, let's say, conceptual questions that are appropriate by the panel. So I think the question of one of the questions that's come up is the question of the engagement ladder. The concept that, you start, you kind of touched upon it. People, take an action on a campaign or volunteer. And then, so it seems like the ladder that builds up to sort of a pinnacle of being, long-term retail subscribers or donors, right? So is that how it pans out, or is there something that it doesn't quite work that way? What's been your experience, and what is the thing that triggers, regular giving, for example, right? So that's the question that I would like to pose to both of you.
Yogita, you want to go first?
Yeah, so I think the retail, there is clearly a ladder, and I think a lot. So there are two things that ensure that you have donors that stay with you over a long period of time. The first one is the acquisition of a quality donor. So is it actually a donor who's interested in your cause, who's got the capacity to stay long, or is it just somebody who's been harassed on the street and gives you $500 and then, it's going to bounce the next time? And a lot of that depends on where you acquire your donors from, what sort of pitch you make, what kind of research you do, and how you acquire that donor. So that's one component. In Breakthrough's early, experiments, we saw a lot of bounces in the, first few months. And a lot of that was just because our face-to-face fundraisers didn't have the confidence to go up to donors who would actually stay long. And it's a lot about training and having the right team on the ground. But if you want a long-term engaged donor, then you really need a long-term calendar. And with Breakthrough, we've realized that starting with a welcome call, we've created a customized welcome pack. We send a whole series of communication. We do personal calling and moving them along. And we've also seen that when you invite them to donate, volunteer, donate, volunteer, donate, volunteer, rather than just donate all the time, that really helps whether they choose to volunteer or not, and many do. That really makes a difference. We've actually created this property called Team Change, and we call it the community of change makers. And that's worked really well because it gives donors and volunteers a common identity saying, I care about, women's rights. I care about violence against women. I'm one of those unique people, part of this exclusive club that really does things for, humanity. And we've therefore created a whole bunch of identity markers like their Facebook profile page, their signature, the way they speak about themselves. They come in and blog for us, write for us. And when you start doing all of that, then it goes beyond the transaction. It becomes, much more of a relationship, but it requires huge amounts of effort. But it's worked for us. The donors who stayed on have gone on and raised funds for us, have done a whole series of things. So.
Thanks, Yogita. Are we quickly on the engagement ladder, because on the question box, there are many other interesting questions now.
Yeah, no, I think Yogita covered a lot of that. It's important to build that relationship. For us, it's quite baked into the model of how we work because we're primarily about citizens taking action. But if that is not the kind of organization you are, I think it is important to think through that communication strategy because again, getting leads into the system who you can eventually turn into donors is dependent on having good quality communication and having a presence on different media. So I think even before you're thinking of donor communication, it's important to have like communication in place so that potential donors are also seeing why they would, you're building that credibility, right, for yourself.
I think one of the questions that came up, I know that, you were supposed to ask questions of each other and me as well, but I'm trying to see if we can answer as many or if we can address some of the questions in the box. So one of the questions that came up is, how does an organization decide on the mix of sources, the different channels? What is the appropriate mix for itself, right? I mean, it's clear that, as Divya put it, retail is very precious for a variety of reasons, et cetera, but it has some advantages. So how does this question get addressed in your context?
So I can take that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the way to actually decide the mix within retail is to actually look at all your assets and do an assessment of it. So what is it that in every organization has something unique? So in the case of Jhatkaa, you have all these people who are online campaigners, online petitioners, people who are, in a sense, activists.
So Yogita, not just within retail, but I'm saying as a mix for the organization. You know, you have the one end is highly restricted programmatic funding from a foundation, let's say. The other end is retail. So how does one sort of, I mean, you run a fundraising department that does all this. Yeah.
Okay. So again, it's a you have to see where your strengths and what your assets are. In our case, we have already got existing networks of foundations that we work with, so that becomes our mainstay. And then you start looking at what your other sources are. So for example, if you have board members who are connected to corporations, then you can estimate how many, how much income you could possibly get through word of mouth access. If you have a large campaign, if you do a lot of campaigns, in Breakthrough's case, the reason we ventured into retail and said we'd be able to grow retail over a period of time is because we have strength in communication. And we thought we could leverage those communication assets. Because we can tell stories, we know that we can actually convert that into individual donations. So really, it's looking at the assets you have and say, which one would you put your money on first, second, and third? And that creates a ladder, in a sense, saying, if I have to get 100 rupees, I know 50 comes from, say, foundations, 25 comes from corporations, and 25 comes from retail. But it's really about assessing what your strengths are in that moment.
Thanks, Yogita. Avi, I have a different question for you. As an organization that works on multiple issues, right? So can you, are there some, I mean, would you say that you can fundraise on anything, on any cause? Are there some causes that are better supported? Are there some causes that are easier to raise money about? And equally, is there a certain profile of donor that can be, that comes out? Or is all that, not so clear? So the two questions. One is, what kind of causes lend themselves to retail, and what sort of people? Right.
I mean, I think we are a bit more of a hard sell than more traditional nonprofits, because if you're, say, working in education or building houses for the poor, you can really do the math pretty easily and say, if you give us X amount per month for a year, you could fund the education of so many kids or whatever. Whereas with us, we work on advocacy campaigns, and we have found it's easy to raise money one time for tactical stuff. And people come in believing in a cause. So maybe you come in and sign a petition around saving trees in Delhi or Bangalore. And then if we're raising money for that specific campaign because someone believes in that cause, they're going to give money. Our challenge has been, and I don't think we've cracked this, is how do you turn that one-time giver into someone who is giving us more consistently? And my sense is a lot of that has to do with building that relationship with the person, and them seeing that it wasn't just that one campaign in isolation, but really connecting with our larger vision and mission of the organization.
And do you have a sense of who your donor is? I mean, what's the kind of profile? I mean, that's a question that'll be interesting to hear from you as well. Yogita, it's a question in the panel.
Yeah, given that our primary means of communication is digital, our audience tends to be, again, quite self-limiting in terms of it's urban middle class folk. So that tends to be the profile, and of course some of them are much younger. So we don't collect demographic data in terms of age, but I think that also obviously has an effect on how likely they are to give.
Avi, this idea that if you worked on governance or criminal justice system or some of the more abstract issues, it's difficult to make those issues street smart. Would you buy that? I mean, street smart enough for fundraising to happen.
I mean, I think you have to come up with a good theory of being, right? Like a theory of change in terms of how is this person giving you this consistent money? Because if it's a tactic, it's easy to draw that one-to-one relation. But what is the theory of your organization of creating long-term impact in the world, and can you bring that person on board? But it isn't easy. I don't know. What do you think, Anand? I'm curious to hear your take.
uh, yes, thank you. I think it is possible. I think it is possible to get people to be thoughtful. I mean, my view is it's. I mean, traditionally fundraising has been seen as an emotional thing. That giving is emotional. But over the last 20 years, slowly I've begun to realize that you can have people who, of course, feel for the cause, but are also thoughtful about, I mean, and who understand it when you say that you can't make a girl empowered overnight with one donation of 500 rupees, or you can't, stop tree felling in RA by just something, right? So you need a sustained effort. So the sort of the theory of how you have impact. I think it is possible to take people. I think it's possible, and there's experience also in India and worldwide that it's possible to do that. But it's kind of hard work and does take skills, capital, persistence. I mean, I would say the single biggest quality in an organization is sheer bullheadedness, that we want to make this happen, and that's how it works. Yogita, maybe you want to come in and say a bit.
Yeah, so again, I think one of the reasons a lot of people struggle with, developing long-term givers is because it's transactional. I think a lot of Indian fundraising, retail fundraising, is just about the transaction. And the minute you switch it to having meaningful conversations, and like you said, I would rather have a small band of people who are deeply committed and concerned about an issue who give me regularly than have like hundreds of thousands of people who come in and go. And I think it's that mindset that you need to build. So it's really about how you train your teams. And I know you did this at Amnesty, Anand, so it'd be interesting to hear how you, in a sense, how you pitched a very hardcore rights-based concept to donors. It'd be interesting to hear that.
Yes, I think for the purpose of the conversation, given the time we have, it might be good to just take that on faith. I'm happy to talk about how this is done. I think there's enough evidence to show that all kinds of causes people can be thoughtful about and can participate in the journey. I want to end this. We're running out of time, I guess. So my last sort of question is, or Avi, Divya, I thought we had half hour, right? Or am I getting that wrong?
Yeah, I think you can take another 5 minutes, because wrap up I can do very quickly.
Okay, all right. So, so I think the hard question that I think most of the people in the audience are asking us, Yogita and Avi, is if we were to somehow bootstrap this, right, without access to too much capital, right? If you were to be, in classic Indian jugaad, right? I mean, very clever, some way of bootstrapping. What would that? It'd be interesting to hear if I'm really keen to do this, but I don't have, everything lined up. I don't have my board lined up. I don't have capital particularly lined up. What would be your thoughts on how would an organization bootstrap this? I mean, I hear a lot of people asking that question. And if we had a good answer, then we would have persuaded a lot of people towards retail.
I guess how we bootstrapped it was, we did actually apply for some grants that to build financial sustainability for the organization. Some to our existing funders. We also kind of mapped out projections and look to raise no interest loans from well-wishers. And what's interesting is sometimes you can convert those no interest loans into donations in the longer term. But I think the key thing before you even get to that stage is you need to have a decent set of leads, because who are you going to pure street fundraising, just like cold, I think your success rate is going to be so low that it might actually not help your cause in terms of getting more of your organization on board. So I remember when we started to pilot this, I would actually physically call people on our membership, and I spent a few hours, did around 30 calls, and found that I could do around a 10% conversion. So I'd call 10 people and I could get one person to give recurring. Based on that, we said, okay, I'm the managing trustee. I know so much about the organization, but if we got a new fundraiser, can we target around 1.5 or 2% conversion? I think something that you folks at Rootbridges have been talking about is even more interesting, is in terms of how can you up people who are much warmer rather than calling everyone in your leads network. So I think there are different ways you can look to kind of optimize, or rather minimize your cost outflow at the start, and also potentially there is going to be that hard work. You'd have to fundraise for the part on Shemeer's graph before it kind of breaks even, which could be anywhere. I mean, I think Shemeer might have been a bit ambitious. When we did our math, it was looking like 15 to 18 months, more like.
Yogita, how would you bootstrap?
So many ways. One, of course, is to look at your current assets and look at who are the people who can actually help you get a network of people whom you can reach out to and then do the calling. The other is we are great believers in the hybrid model. So I do think in the short run, getting enough of one-time donations, which then fund your, monthly giving for the long run. So have a short-term objective and a long-term objective, but keep your eyes on both and don't let go. That's really worked for us. So,
and I think you're saying use the money raised by one time, not for program.
Not for program, feed into the other.
But for feeding into, that's a great idea, Yogita.
And that's working for us. I think one of the things that we're looking at that's working for us. The other is your donor is also a source, is a network. So using everyone you know as a network. One of the things we've done during COVID times is we've called all our donors and we've asked them to crowdfund for us. So it's been like a massive donor get donor. We have about 50, 60 pages which have come up over this past month. And they're all raising funds for us. So I really think it's about thinking as much as you can. How can I get every single person I know to fundraise for me?
Oh, that's a wonderful note.
Yeah,
yes,
actually,
yes,
Anand, we do have more time. We have up to 7:25, and people would really like to hear. I think there are more questions to be answered, and we'd also like to hear some of the questions that Yogita and Avi have for you. So I think let's do the round and keep going.
All right. So we'd continue for a little bit longer. I think on this, I think the key question is, if you're keen to get going, and, of course, capital funding is always short. Right? I think what I'm hearing you people say is, every organization, no matter how small, how large, there is always a network of well-wishers. I mean, they may not have been, super organized. I mean, there might be a newsletter. There's something. There's a network of well-wishers. And I think, Yogita, the way I understood you to be saying is that that network of well-wishers, you really think about how can you make them both donors and people who can be your ambassadors to get further donations. And Avi, I think your example of personally picking up the phone and calling up some people and trying to get them to start giving. And I think the second point you made, Yogita, is that whatever initial money you manage to raise from retail donors, do not use it for program purposes. Use it for investing further in retail fundraising. Whether initially you're able to succeed in getting some regular donations or succeed in getting some one-off donations. Use the money that you get initially. The temptation, of course, there are always program needs, but don't go there. But see if you can sort of ring fence it and use it to grow the fundraising sort of pie, right? So that seems to be broadly the the approach to bootstrapping. I have, I think the other question that has kind of hung around is, what is the relationship between, are all leads only online? Like, for example, we all know that people use telecalling. There's quite a lot of telecalling going on. There's quite a lot of face-to-face conversations going on. There's online crowdfunding going on. And yet we seem to be saying something about regular giving and the step up from one to regular, and something there that requires maybe human offline kind of interaction. So it might be interesting to hear what your thoughts are on offline and online. I mean, it's a question I'm picking up from the box. Yeah.
Avi, you're taking that?
I mean, I think pure online.
Either of you can start, I think.
The pure online, I think the conversion is much harder. And, I see, the online channel as being your source for generating leads and, pushing your content out there so that you can bring in people who are potentially interested in the kind of work that you do.
But Avi, why do you say that? Because right now we're being inundated with online giving, keto, tremendous amount of, Give India raised, I think, nearly 100 crores on the, all the organizations in Give India together, right, for COVID.
I think it really depends again also on the kind of cause. I'm probably talking very much for an organization like Jhatkaa. Like if you see on Give India, most of the organizations are working in a space where you can talk about direct beneficiaries. Whereas if you're working on policy, advocacy, and things like that, you don't really have that framework. So I think for us, it's a lot more about taking people on their journey. Whereas as opposed to, an organization that is feeding the poor or doing something much more direct like that, where I actually think it's potentially easier for them. And, which is what works really well on Keto and Milap, is showing those human faces. And it's like, this person needs you. That really pulls on heartstrings. For an organization like us, we often think of how can we turn the work we do into emotional stuff, because, putting up a public policy paper is not going to excite people as much to come and donate as much as a photo of a child in need.
So when you did those calls, Ravi, when you did those calls, was your appeal emotional or intellectual or both? What kind of worked?
I think it depended on who picked up the phone, and I think that's one of the really important things with fundraising. And I want to pose to you the question of like what it takes to be a good fundraiser, because someone I saw had asked a question about the team, what kind of team is required. So for me, I knew that I should be able to pivot really easily depending on the person I'm talking to, and first ascertaining what were the interests that they had. So actually spending the starting of the call listening to them, asking them what problems they face, so I could find the point where I could, bring alignment to the work we do and what they're interested in. And then, talk about, like, for us, I have a standard spiel about how we're trying to get citizens to engage more in democracy. And, that's one of the ways we see we'll be able to shift a lot of India's problems. But yeah, I think, having that script is important, and, trying a few calls yourself. So if you don't have that script already, will be important.
For us, actually, we've had quite a different experience, Avi. I think what we found is that our online donors are actually far more sticky than our offline donors, because these are people who've come in on their own because they've seen an ad somewhere, or they've responded to an email, and it takes that much initiative to actually go to the website, check out the donation page, click on donate. And if they've gone through that entire effort, they've done a fair amount of homework. So I think we've had a slightly, I cannot stress enough the power of storytelling. We found that, and we work really, really, really hard to work on, just refining what we put out there. Today off Instagram, we got somebody who just saw an ad and gave us 50,000 rupees just off an ad on Instagram. And that's possible. We didn't think it was possible, but it is possible. So I think it's really about how compelling your communication is and how much you believe in what you're putting out. For me, I think that's what's worked for us. Anant, I would like to really hear about how you pitch like hardcore rights-based issues. It would like really keen to hear. And I think Avi seconded that.
Yes. So in the see, of course, one caveat we must put on the table, right, is that organizations like Amnesty and Greenpeace have, let's say, the international organization is extremely convinced about retail fundraising. Right? So it's the India board is not so convinced. I mean, the India board is like all our boards, in fact, quite skeptical and so on. But at least the international organization understands retail fundraising. That's one. And the second is that therefore a certain amount of patience, capital, etc., are available. And so those are caveats. But having said that, I think basically, the way we approached it both, at least the way I thought of it both in Amnesty and Greenpeace, is that it is true that, for example, if you take the issue of death penalty, let's say, or opposition to the death penalty, which is like a kind of Amnesty favorite, right? And I mean, I can really imagine Amnesty in India, arguing against death penalty for Ajmal Kasab, for example, and how popular that would be, right? I mean, but it's a value. I mean, it's a fundamental thing that you and the organization believe in, right? So the way I thought about it is that there is no reason why you have to be popular. You just have to have a certain number of people who are, on your side on that issue. I mean, it is like, if you think about, even if you think about 1 million paying members, I mean, none of these organizations are anywhere close to that. I'm just saying, even if you imagine 1 million paying members in India, 1 million in India is still like, a drop in the ocean. So it's not like we have to win an election, or it's not like we have to have the majority on our side. It is only important to know that there is a group. I mean, there is an audience that is with you, and that is sincerely with you, and that shares your values, that shares your. So the challenge is really to find them at one level. The second level is the challenge is really to find, to take them on a journey where they may have come in on a let's say more emotional hook, right? But you take them on a journey when they kind of see your point, right? I mean, in the case of Amnesty, I give you a classic example. Our first campaign in India in 2000 and whatever it was, 12, I think, was justice for war victims. I mean, the civil war victims in Sri Lanka. You can imagine which part of the country is that campaign. An absolute roaring success. We had, I mean, all Tamils are crazy about the issue, right? I mean, so I don't mean to be sarcastic. I'm just stating a fact. So we ended up with a campaign which had actually, Shemeer, correct me if I get the number wrong, about 3.5 million signatures.
Yeah.
Most of it on missed calls and so on. We had 3.5 million signatures, right? So that database, we very quickly got to about 50,000 donors, one-time donors from that, very, very quickly using telecalling. But the challenge with that group was that there were still people, most people in that group believed that, Mahinda Rajapakse should be hanged, right, for his crimes against Tamils, right? So that group was not with you, on your full spectrum, right? So the point is, we are absolutely convinced that there are about 10,000 people in that group who are with you through and through, right? So the challenge is to find that 10,000 and keep them with you. That's always how how I imagine. Same with Greenpeace, right? I mean, it's not like you don't have to have everybody. So you don't have to be particularly popular. You just need to have good relationships with your constituency, if you like. That's how I always thought of it.
And Anant, I'd like to ask you about building a team, because this is something that I've kind of failed at, and like, full disclosure for the audience, we're outsourcing to Rootbridge. You would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, as a joke, as a kind of joke, we hope many of you fail to build your teams and outsource the work to us at Rootbridge. But that's completely a joke. We'd be very, very happy if more and more people succeeded in building their own team. I think the real challenge is that in most of our organizations, and correctly, the organization is dominated by its program, and the organization is also dominated, therefore, by its program team. And the program team has a vocabulary, has a way of talking about things, that makes complete sense to them, but makes no sense to anybody outside. We know this, right? I mean, for example, most things that are on organizations' websites don't, are not easily connectable by ordinary folks. So the most important thing is to I think for the head of the organization to recognize that there is great value to be added to the organization's core mission, to its soul, if you like, by making this connection to ordinary people and making these conversations with ordinary people. So the organization has to realize that, the leader has to lead the organization in realizing that this is important. This is not, some form of pandering to the masses or some such thing. This is actually a very serious effort to make yourself connect to people in your society, right? So once that is done, I think the fundraisers who come in also have the space to shape the organization to, right? So I think, at least in my experience, that's been kind of the key. But if you've not succeeded, it might not be because you don't see this, but there may be other reasons for it. I just want to quote an anecdote. Recently, I think 2 years ago, somebody told me that, the Hungarian, it's a Hungarian example, East Europe, Hungarian Civil Liberties Union, it's like the American Civil Liberties Union or the PUCL, an organization that's very focused on rights and, constantly going to court and challenging the government and so forth. So they lost their biggest funder overnight, or they lost their only funder overnight. And the executive director of the Hungarian Civil Liberties Union apparently said that the biggest gain from that pain was that they were forced to talk to their own society. Their biggest foundational donor was, of course, overseas. But they had to make sense to the ordinary people of their society. We can have many definitions of ordinary, but I'm just basically saying, so that I think is a great opportunity. And I think that's something that people should see, and the leaders should engineer in their organizations. So may I do, I'm just picking up the last question. So what's the most exciting thing, Yogita, in this retail journey for you, right? What has been really exciting? And Avi, for you too, right? What excites you about this? It's hard, etc., etc. But what really excites you about that? And that might be a good point to end on, right?
For me, it's just the experimentation. Like we said when we chatted, I think over the past year and a half, 2 years, the retail team and I, all we've done is try new things. And some work, some don't, but it's just the fun of trying, reaching out to people. That's one. And the second is just the connect you get. I think in some senses, when you have people who put faith in your work, it reaffirms your work to yourself and to the organization, and that's a form of inspiration which you can't get anywhere else. So I think that's, for me, the big takeout.
Yeah, I think Yogita, you articulated that really well. For me, it's like that credibility that our work has value and people are willing to back it. So it reinforces that, and our long-term vision is to be as close to 100% funded by retail donations as possible.
Good luck on that direction, Avi. I think I very much echo what you said, Yogita, about when people place their faith in you. For example, some of the most moving experiences for me in Amnesty and Greenpeace has been when somebody would call up and say there was an auto rickshaw driver who heard our street fundraiser and signed up to give a regular donation, right? So you both feel humbled and deeply motivated by it. So those have been really high points. So thank you both for making this into I think at least to me a lively conversation. I hope our
A lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for organizing.
Back to you, Divya.
Hey, thank you. Thanks, Anant, Avi, and Yogita for this. So we kind of come to a close and towards the end of this entire session. I've been reading through all the chat questions right through. We have to say that, this entire topic is so massive because there is an entire element of communications and storytelling in it. There's a bit on technology that Shemeer skimmed the surface of that. And then, there are so many issues all encompassed, and it's kind of hard to do justice in 1.5 hours. What we aim to do was to pick your interest, to try and give you an overview, to try and, get you more excited about getting on this journey. And what we'd like to leave you with is a couple of things that you can actually take away and start working with and have some internal conversations about within your organization as well as within your funders, within your well-wishers, etc. So, this deck is certainly will be made available to all of you. The model or the projector that Shemeer used to generate those graphs will be there with you. So once you've had an idea of what is your mix of fundraising and you've had a conversation about that, you can, and you want to deep dive into what percentage would be retail and what the numbers based on your investment, what would you like to, what numbers would you like to put? You would be able to get a few numbers. We're happy to help you at any point, and you can reach out to us to take you through this. But it's a basic Excel sheet which you can actually work on. We also, just because we didn't spend enough time on list building. And that's always a good way to start. So we've got a small template for you, which is how do you think about building your lists, starting from your well-wishers, your board's friends, etc. And how do you all bring that together? And that's and that's like the best group that you can start fundraising for. So maybe you can think about it. And like Avi said, it's a simple phone call, and a little bit of time invested from the core team of your organization to start off with that. And then we also have a video from the resource mobilization head at Amnesty, the Sachin Singh. So he's actually given you, there's a small video about his journey that he talks about, and Amnesty's journey as it is right now. And also, some of the numbers there. So I'm sure you'll want to see what it looks like in practice from theory. Shemeer had taken a couple of numbers to give you those examples, and he'll tell you what things look like. So there's a little bit of a reality orientation out there for you. So we've got this set of things that we will make available to all of you. So just one thing I wanted to point out is that, so it may feel very overwhelming to start all of this in-house. So then there are a lot of people, including Rootbridge, one of many, who actually take you through this journey to help you understand it, to help you plot what your retail journey could look like, and possibly even set you off on that journey until you're ready to take it in-house, or some organizations decide to keep it outside. So these are all options available, and we're always open for more conversation. And I think the team at Arthan also felt like this is just the start, and we'd hope to have many more such conversations.
And Divya, maybe it's possible to do a kind of take all the questions and write quick answers to them like a FAQ or something.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that. We will compile all the answers and make it available to everyone.
I mean,
So,
and all the questions that have been put and that have not been answered also can be compiled.
Definitely. Yes. Yeah. So that's an action point for us. We'll get all the questions down and we'll try, because some of them are slightly more detailed. We'll need to do some more reading and putting it down in a clear way. So on that note, I'd like to hand the session back to Arthan's team. And thank you all very, very much for listening to us, for participating in all sorts of ways. The questions were very, very animated, and it felt that you were extremely engaged, even though we couldn't see each of you. And we hope to take this conversation forward, either as a group or as one-on-one. Thank you very much, and thank you to the Arthan team as well.
Thank you so much, Divya. And just echoing what you said, we definitely look forward to working with Rootbridge on something like this on a regular basis. So we will be discussing that with you. And thank you so much, Shemeer and Anant and Yogita and Avijit. I mean, definitely this session was super helpful, and I won't take too much time from everyone now. Just want to thank everyone and all the participants. Just to update you on what we have next with respect to our initiative is the Future of Jobs session, which is this Thursday and Friday, 25th and 26th of June. You can find you can register for the same on arthanevents.com. Just to specify, we all understand fundraising is a critical issue, but the repercussions of that we will be seeing with respect to the jobs market as well. And the session that we're covering will talk about not only the kind of organizations that are hiring, but also the kind of sectors that are coming up, trying to see what are the positives that are coming out of the situation, because of course the loss of jobs is something that we are anyway seeing. And we will also be talking about the kind of skills that will be required. So we hope that you will register for that as well, and we hope to see you for that session. So thank you so much everyone again, and take care. Bye.